Ran out of time to finish the build because tomorrow's Mesa Day, but you're going to get to see what I got. I also already tried to record this video once and accidentally ended up making it like almost an hour long video on my Mesa build, so, you know, we're redoing that. But this is my Mesa build. I'm going to show it off because tomorrow is both the release of Mesa's heirloom skin, which is why I have just over 400 platinum sitting in my account right now, and also, if you watch TennoCon, you can get a free Mesa Prime. Very nice. So I'm going to go over the build real quick, and you can choose to use it or not. If you want to give me advice on how to improve the build, you're free to. I will most likely ignore it. But you still can, because most likely doesn't mean guaranteed. If it's really good and it sticks to the kind of vibe I'm going for on the build, I might take advantage of it. So let's start with the stuff you can see on screen right now. Forged Topaz Archon Shards. You just go for 5 of these with secondary crit chance. These give you 375% crit chance for your secondaries total, as long as you're killing enemies affected by heat. Regulators are modded for heat, which allows you to get both these Forged Topaz Archon Shards, as well as Arcane Hotshot, which you will see in a second. As for abilities, I personally do not currently have a Subsume. I just hadn't really decided on one yet. But there are some good options that I just throw out there. Top 2 options are Nourish, which gives you viral and energy regen, viral procs and energy regen, and Bright Bonnet, which gives you a little bit of ability strength, a bunch of energy regen, and allows you to kind of move in your 4 without using Mesa's Waltz. We'll go over Mesa's Waltz later. You would put all of these over Ballistic Battery. Shooting Gallery is just way too good. You can see it there, especially with Muzzle Flash. Shatter Shield is very good defensively, and Peacemaker is basically the reason why you would even play Mesa in the first place. So let's look at the Mesa. These mods are kind of mismatched right now. Technically, I should be using Corrosive Projection as my aura slot, but I am using Brief Respite because I plan on replacing this Rolling Guard with a Catalyzing Shields as soon as I get one, and I'd prefer to farm it myself rather than just buy one. So technically I should be using Corrosive Projection, but I still do like the very minor shield gating that I get from Brief Respite, which will get much stronger once I replace this Rolling Guard. But this Rolling Guard can really be any defensive mod you want. Rolling Guard, Catalyzing Shields, Adaptation, anything. As for the Exilis, I personally am using Power Drift, a little bit of ability strength. Chance to resist knockdown isn't huge unless you have 100% with your PSF, but you don't really need that as Mesa because you are seemingly immune to knockdowns while in your Peacemaker. You get a little bit extra damage. That's not huge. You get a little bit of extra damage reduction on Shatter Shield, which is quite nice. Hey, it's black screen editing me. I completely forgot to mention this. I kind of brought it up, but the reason I don't like using Mesa Waltz is like twofold. I do kind of like that you can move around a little bit, but the slow movement doesn't really give you a ton of advantages. I guess it lets you go around corners, but it doesn't really give you a ton of like defensive advantages. But the 2 reasons I really don't like it are because, one, and this is just true, that in Mesa's Waltz, if you are not actively firing with your 4, you are, like, the reticle is expanding and you're losing that like built up focus fire. And I prefer the focus fire, especially, you know, for how long I tend to spend in the ability. It's nice to have that focus. And one that I'm not entirely sure is true, but feels to be true, which is that I feel like when you're in Mesa's Waltz, you can get like minor staggered. You can't get like fully knocked down or knocked back, but you can get like the stumble staggers. I feel like I've gotten those quite a bit while in Mesa's Waltz, and that sucks, so I don't like it. Anyway, that's why I forgot to mention it, but that's why I don't use Mesa's Waltz in my Exilis. And a little bit of a damage buff on Shooting Gallery as well with the strength. Same reason I went for Precision Intensify was to get that damage multiplier, even though, from what I understand, it stacks additively with any damage mods on your regulators. Prime Flow Equilibrium, to keep your energy always maxed out, and Prime Flow is just to have quite a bit. Streamline and Continuity, to keep your Peacemaker energy costs down. The Continuity also keeps Shatter Shield and Shooting Gallery durations long. That is very good. Muzzle Flash to blind melee enemies, since Shatter Shield only applies to ranged enemies, and Stretch to give you a lot of range on that Muzzle Flash. Arcanes are Velocity and Hotshot. Hotshot is a necessity for this build because we're going big time crits. Arcane Hotshot is just like, it's a no-brainer. You kind of have to go for it. Velocity gives you a bunch of fire rate, but if you want something more defensive, you can very easily go for a Circumvent or an Aegis. They are both very good at defensive options. Energize is okay for energy, but you really don't need it, especially with some other options like the Subsumes that I mentioned earlier, or if you use a Panzer Volpaphyla with, or I guess any companion, with Synth Deconstruct to spawn a bunch of health orbs along with your Equilibrium. I personally use a Panzer Volpaphyla because it gives me Viral, and since it gives me Viral, I don't have to use Nourish as my subsume, so I can use plenty of other things, potentially even like a Zada's Whisper just for void damage. The primary and secondary are just kind of whatever. I personally use the Sato Prime for the alt-fire priming, which is useful for just damage in general, but also for Furex Wraith, you'll see in a second. Plus the primary fire just does a decent chunk of damage. Furus is used for a bunch of damage on things that can't be targeted by the regulators, such as bosses like, you know, the tank and the Fragmented Tide, and the like Archons. It's just one of those things where you kind of charge it up, you convert it over to into its uncommon form, and then you just kind of let it sit there. If you want to follow my Furus build, don't, because it's not my build, it's someone else's build. I couldn't tell you whose, but it's someone else's build. I'll show you the upgrades here, but it is Stormburst, Extended Volley, Elemental Balance, modded for Viral Heat with both of the crit mods, and some multi-shot mods. I will be putting a couple extra mods on it, but I don't have it finished yet. Clearly, it's still unranked. But these two don't really matter. I suggest having a primer and a good single target weapon so that you can prime enemies, again, for just general use, but also Furex Wraith. We'll talk about that. And a single target weapon for the things that Mesa regulators can't target, and for nullifier bubbles, the Sato also deals with that decently. Let's talk about the regulators. Outburst is not done, but you can kind of potentially think about what I need that priming for. But secondary Outburst is very good. Once I get it to max rank, it is 20% crit chance and crit damage per combo multiplier. And you get 12x combo multiplier. I'll just tell you now, it's initial combo stuff using melee crescendo. So you get a bunch of crit chance, 360% crit chance and crit damage. Very nice. The mods are just your typical Galvanized Fusion, Galvanized Shot for multi-shot and for a bunch of direct damage, Pistol Gambit and Target Cracker for crit chance and crit damage, Pestilence, Jolt, and Primed Heated Charge to go Corrosive Heat. If you do not have any source of viral, mine is being the Panzer Volpaphyla, but if you prefer to use Nourish for your viral, then I would suggest modding for Viral Heat. And then Lethal Torrent for some fire rate and multi-shot. Very nice stuff. I'm currently on Madurai, but that is actually incorrect. I was in the, nearly an hour-long version of this, I was showing off my operator build. You're not going to get to see that. It's just generic damage operator. Plus, I play Vazarin right now for the Void Snare. Void Snare allows you to knock down enemies. The Void Snare pulls them in and opens them up to ground finishers. And ground finishers are very nice for the Furex Wraith. For what it's worth, the reason I haven't finished this in Karnon is because it doesn't matter. The only thing I care about for this is that I get a bunch of base damage here. The attack speed is also nice. It makes my finishers go faster. I could do Swordsman's Flourish for a little bit of extra base damage, but I think the attack speed is worth losing 10 base damage. You might not. As for the build itself, Melee Crescendo, clearly not fully upgraded, but makes it so that you need very few kills, under 30, though I don't remember the exact number at this moment, in order to max out your initial combo when stacked with Corrupt Charge for 30 initial combo, and the unique trait of the Furex Wraith for 20 initial combo, default 50, plus you get 6 per finisher kill. That's why we use Vazarin, which is for finishers. You could do this with something like a Ceramic Dagger as well, which would be easier to get your finisher kills with, but I like the Amalgam Furex body count for just a little bit extra fire rate. The other mods being Finishing Touch for that finisher damage, Sacrificial Steel for crit chance, Gladiator Might for crit damage and crit chance per combo multi, Organ Shatter for crit damage, Blood Rush for crit chance per combo multi. Since you're stacking up so much, you get a bunch of that crit chance. And then Condition Overload is the reason we have a primer. You use your Vazarin Sling to group up a bunch of enemies. I, in this case, alt-fire my Sato into the middle, and then I do a bunch of ground finishers if the enemies are, high enough level to even warrant stacking the outburst in the first place. If you don't want to do this crescendo stuff, by the way, then nothing here really matters. I would personally still use the Amalgam Furax body count for that fire rate, but you could just kind of use, I don't know, whatever you want. And again, if you don't want to do that stuff, then on your regulators, instead of secondary outburst, you could use secondary merciless for up to 360% damage and some reload speed, which doesn't matter. You would not want to use deadhead because Mesa aims for center mass, so you would not get this damage, even though if you could hit headshots, the headshot multiplier would be nice. You could go for secondary fortifier. Secondary fortifier is a bunch of extra damage to overguard, plus it's an amazing defensive option. Or Cascadia Flare. You're applying a ton of heat status effects, so you will get that 480% damage very, very easily. The only reason I would suggest Merciless over Cascadia Flare is that it is significantly easier to farm. If you've played Steel Path, you probably already have a maxed out Merciless. But since I am doing Outburst, I don't need to care about that. My personal ranking of these three, assuming you have them all maxed out, the alternatives, Merciless, Flare, and Fortifier, would be probably Fortifier, Flare, then Merciless in that order. Fortifier is just so nice for defenses. Cascadia Flare is more damage, which is easier to stack, and Merciless is less damage, which is harder to stack, but it's significantly easier to get a maxed out version. For example, this right now can get me 360% damage, but with what I have for Cascadia Flare, I can only get up to 160%. That's the build. Much, much faster. Only took me 11 minutes this time instead of 50, which is always nice. But I need to remember not to hover over Regulator Prime when talking about Mesa, because that's like perv shot. Like, I've done it, congrats, you're a pervert. Yeah, we all know Mesa Heirloom, whatever, so like, we already knew, but still, I don't have to just show it off. Also, for what it's worth, Mesa's passive is not worth it. You get your 15% faster fire rate on the regulators. If you're doing the Furist like me, you're getting 25% faster reload speed, which is nice, but the 50 bonus health when not using melee weapons is very bad. You would be losing out on bare minimum 45% fire rate for 50 bonus health on a frame that cannot really health tank, like not even with persistence. Mesa has very, very low base armor. 135 is, I believe, the third lowest armor in the game. Base Mesa, I believe, actually has the lowest armor in the game at 105, but don't quote me on that. But that's the build. That's the build I use for Mesa. Obviously, like I said, it's not completely done. Even my Vulpaphyla to apply Viral isn't fully done, but once I get Synth Deconstruct, I will be getting a ton of health orbs from this to help with equilibrium. Not that it's even necessary. I very rarely, if ever, run out of energy. The last mod will just be whatever. I use Reinforced Bond with Calculated Redirection to get that 1200 max shields, which gives me a bunch of extra fire rate, which is quite nice. Seismic Bond gives me some efficiency, which is quite nice. Obviously, Viral Quills for the viral, Fetch for the little, like, loot gathering, and Animal Instinct for loot and enemy radar. Tenacious Bond, if the companion's crit chance is over 50%, I'll gain an extra final crit damage multiplier, which is nice. Right now, it is not, because Bite is the most annoying mod in the game to farm, so I'm only at 46% crit chance. I'll also get Chilling Claws farmed up a little bit farther. But once I get Bite, I will get a bunch of extra crit damage from that. So that plus the Viral is why I personally go for Vulpaphyla. But if you want to go for like a robotic, so that you can use Manifold Bond to be able to constantly drop those cooldowns and spam robotic abilities, then my suggestion would personally be to subsume Nourish over your 1 in order to get viral procs, or mod your regulators for viral heat instead of corrosive heat. But like I said at the beginning of this video, tomorrow, hopefully I get to upload this by today. Today is late at night on the 10th, so if it's not uploaded on the 10th, Eastern, by the way, so if you're in a different time zone, it's already the 11th when you get to see this, or when it's uploaded, then it would, don't yell at me. But hopefully I can get this uploaded in time. And because if I can, then I can still say tomorrow you can watch TennoCon live and you will be able to get a new weapon, but more importantly for this video, remember when I said I need to stop hovering over the regulators when I'm talking? More importantly for this video, you can get a free Mesa Prime, which again coincides with the launch of Mesa Heirloom. So once the TennoCon stream ends, which should be at approximately 6 p.m. Eastern, I will go live with Mesa Day. So you can, if you want to, come over to my Twitch channel and check out Mesa Day. There's nothing special about Mesa Day, except I will only be playing Mesa, which means that I won't be doing farms that require me to play anyone else. I will just be playing Mesa. See you there.